Moore Law is underwritten in the public interest by the Moore Law Firm, a legal professional association. This is Moore Law on Fox 19.
Driving any time of the year can be dangerous, but with slick roads and snowy conditions like we've had, you never know what you might run into or what might run into you. So today we're talking about what steps to take if you're in a traffic accident. What do you do if it's not clear who's at fault? Should you accept an offer from the other guy's insurance company? Today's topic, traffic accidents. Give us a call at 513-421-4691. As always, we will take your questions live. Don Moore, good morning.
Good morning, Deb. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I have a question for you.
Uh-oh.
Tell me, which was your favorite commercial?
I like the Taco Bell commercial. I know I'm kind of a follower there, but it was great with all those older people out there.
Yeah, that was clever.
Youngish things.
My wife loved the Clydesdale commercial.
That was very heartwarming. I like that too.
That was touching. And you have some friends you want to say hello to, some viewers.
You know, it's great. Every time I'm out these days, I'm hearing people who say that they were always up Monday morning at 9:30 watching us. So Thelma Ferris, good morning to you.
Super, super. Hey, today we talk about a topic that is really relevant. Like, everybody gets involved in a traffic accident if they drive much. And today we have a real pro with us, Martin Young. Martin, thank you so much for coming.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
Martin he's got two big anniversaries coming. Well, one, he's been practicing law for over 50 years. He also has his 50th wedding anniversary coming up. Martin is a native Cincinnatian. He did University of Cincinnati undergrad and University of Cincinnati Law School. So he's a Cincinnati guy through and through. He knows the car wreck business very, very well. Martin, thanks a lot for being here.
Okay, thank you. My pleasure again.
You know, Martin, what would you say to people if somebody's in a traffic accident? You said the biggest problem is people just don't know what their rights are. Can you talk a little bit about when folks come to you, what should they know?
Well, they should know that lawyers do not charge a fixed fee on personal injury traffic cases. They're charging a percentage. They charge a percentage on the gross settlement. So it is no, and many of the lawyers advertise no fee if no recovery.
Okay. And Don, you've dealt with these cases a lot in your years as an attorney.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. What Martin said is true across the board. For a person to get help from a lawyer for a traffic accident, they don't need any money. All they've got to do is find a lawyer who does it on a regular basis so that they know what they're doing, and basically the lawyer's going to charge a percentage of what he or she collects. So it's called a contingency fee. It's very important because this is a case where everybody's on equal footing, whether you're a really wealthy person or you're a really poor person. When it comes to a personal injury case, you can get help.
Okay. All right, well, let's head to the phones now. We'll start with Randy and Coleraine. Good morning, Randy.
Good morning.
Go right ahead.
Pardon me?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brandy.
I didn't hear what you said. I apologize.
Will you just go right ahead with your question?
I was in a car accident, and the opposite party's insurance agency keeps trying to settle outside of court, and then it happened on the exit ramp coming into Kentucky, and we were both Ohio drivers. So how should I go forth dealing with this?
Okay. Martin, what would you suggest?
Well, if they're Ohio drivers and they were going into Kentucky, where did the accident take place, whether it's going to be Ohio or Kentucky? If it was in Ohio, then the jurisdiction would be here in Ohio. If they did enter Kentucky, that even though they're both Ohio drivers and they both might have Ohio insurance, then Kentucky would prevail.
Okay.
And sometimes a lawyer can actually have some say-so. If, like, a Kentucky driver hits a person in Ohio, they could sue them in either state, can't they?
That can happen, yes.
And if it's a big enough case, if they don't want to go to circuit court or common pleas court, do they have an alternative?
There are other courts. There's a municipal court in Cincinnati, if that's what they want to do. And there is a court in Kentucky that has a similar, although I practice in Ohio, I'm not as familiar in Kentucky.
Well, one of the things that we run into sometimes is if it's a large enough case and we would prefer it, and we've got diversity of citizenship, that is the Ohio-Kentucky person, you can go to federal court if it's a large enough case. Sometimes that's a good move, sometimes that's not a good move.
Okay.
They have to be over $75,000 too.
Yeah, there's minimum amount, that's right.
So there's all kinds of rules.
Oh, there is, there is.
I'm sure that's true.
It's not simple, that's for sure.
All right, well, let's see, Debbie in Indiana. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a quick question for you. My son was in an accident. He was not the driver, but he has really bad scarring on his face. Is he entitled to anything?
What was that question?
Go ahead, Don. I think you heard it better.
What Debbie was asking us about is whether her son's entitled to any reimbursement for disfigurement from an accident. Is that one of the damages that people
Yes,
can
that
collect?
is, certainly. That is important. One key issue is, of course, is that whether they were wearing a seatbelt or not, and that can be a factor.
Okay, and one of the things that we've run into sometimes with the disfigurement claim is whether or not there is a potential for revision. In other words, can a plastic surgeon help that person? If a plastic surgeon can help that person, then the amount it would cost for the plastic surgeon to do the work would be part of their damages as well.
And I just wanted to go back real quick. We have just about a minute before we go to a commercial. But people's rights, you said, you know, when they come to you, is there something that they, you know, you said that they just don't know? Do you run into that a lot?
Well, yes, that does. After all, accident victims may have only had one accident in their life, possibly two at most. And so they are entitled to and they're eligible to get their automobile fixed, of course. And if it's a total of fair market value, they're eligible to get their medical expenses, as Don was talking, and that includes, if it's plastic surgery, revision. They're entitled to wage loss, and they're also entitled to be reimbursed for their pain and suffering.
Okay. All right. We are going to take a break right now. We'll be back talking about traffic accidents. Give us a call, 513-421-4691.
Welcome back to More Law on Fox 19, your legal questions live, with local broadcaster and award-winning reporter Deb Haas and Cincinnati personal injury attorney Don Moore, recognized by Ohio Super Lawyers. More answers, more help, more law on Fox 19.
All right, now we will take you to your More Law Connection, where Dan Moore is answering viewer emails. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Deb. Our first question this morning is from Charlotte. She wants to know, if I witness a crime, do I have a legal responsibility to report it? Well, this may surprise some people, but the answer to this is generally no. If you witness a crime, you don't have the responsibility or the legal obligation to report that to the authorities. There are some exceptions, like everything in the law. And in Ohio, for example, you have a duty to report a felony if you know that it's been committed. In Kentucky, you have no such obligation. In Ohio, you have an obligation to report child abuse if you're a certain professional, like a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer. In Kentucky, though, it's more restrictive, or the duty is more expansive, rather, and you have a duty, if you're a regular citizen in Kentucky, to report child abuse. You don't have to have any special title to have that obligation. So outside of those exceptions, you generally have no duty to report crimes of another. Deb, back to you.
All right, but I say do it because it's the right thing to do. We are back now with our guest, Martin Young. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to head back to the phones now and start off with Mary in Cincinnati. Mary, as I understand it, your grandson was in an accident. You have an attorney, but you want to know if you can get a different one?
Yes. The reason why is that he never followed up on our questions or my grandson going to the doctor. My grandson was hurt pretty bad. He broke his collarbone and part of dislocated his shoulder. And we wanted to know if we could probably change attorneys. We have not seen him. We've only heard from him twice.
Would you say that you can just dump one and move on to the next? Or?
Well, you can change attorneys. That's not a problem. You can write them a letter of dismissal, notify the insurance company. You should, of course, in Ohio, you need a written agreement, and you should look at the agreement and see what consequences there may, if any, on discharge.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Everett in Alexandria. Everett, you have a question about that accident on 275 a few weeks back.
Yes, ma'am. Is that considered an act of God and each person's insurance is responsible for that party? Or if somebody ran into the other person, is there a way to prove that they would be responsible?
Wow, I'm sure they're still sifting through all of that.
That was a complicated mess, and that's a great question. Frankly, an act of God is an unusual defense. Actually, act of God is not a defense. The defense is sudden emergency. And a person is excused from liability if a sudden emergency that they don't create happens and they don't have adequate time to respond to it. So the thing that's, that you need to bear in mind is that generally speaking, if a person does something negligent, they're going to be held accountable for it. So if you're run into by someone else and they have a responsibility to maintain control of their vehicle, and that sudden emergency exception doesn't apply, that defense doesn't apply, then they're on the dime, they're liable. You got 100 cars involved in that mess. There's going to be a lot of hassling and a lot of fighting. You don't have to accept that it was a quote act of God or a sudden emergency. You can contest it, and if you're hurt badly, it's worthwhile to pursue.
How long do you think that's going to take with all those cars involved to get through and figure out who's responsible for what?
Well, it'll take a couple of years probably. On the collision aspect, generally, most people will just go against their own carrier, pay their deductible, get their car fixed so they're back on the road.
Right.
And then they'll worry about subrogating or going back against the other party if they think they've got a good claim. On the injuries, a lot of it has to do with just how badly a person's hurt and how long it takes them to recover. Everybody needs to know the statute's 2 years. So if they take longer than 2 years, then they're gonna run out of time. So you either settle or file suit before the 2 years is up.
Okay. All right, let's go back to Dan Moore now with another email question. Dan?
Okay, great. Thanks, Deb. Our second question is from Rick. He says, I had bought a chainsaw from someone on Craigslist. It almost blew up in my face when I tried to use it. Do I have any recourse? Well, first let's talk about the personal injury aspect of that. Do you have a personal injury claim? The answer to that is no. If you don't have an injury, you don't have a claim. A near miss or something bad almost happening doesn't count. So the next question becomes, can you get your money back? Well, you can get your money back probably in this situation because when you bought the chainsaw, it was probably with the assumption that the chainsaw was going to work. It didn't work, and therefore the person who sold it to you has to give you your money back. If that person doesn't give you your money back voluntarily, then you can take that person to what's called small claims court. Small claims court is a court designed to handle smaller claims like this. It's easier for somebody who's not represented. In fact, you don't have to be represented to handle your claim there. The cost of filing the case is lower. The judge will hear the case and decide whether you should get your money back, and I think you probably will. So if you have a question, go to fox19.com, click on the More Law button, fill out the Send Us Your Questions form and submit it to us. And as always, we're going to do our best to answer your question. Deb, that's it for me today. I'll see you guys next week.
We'll see you next week, Dan, and we'll see you all in just a few minutes. We'll be back with more law, talking about traffic accidents. 513-421-4691.